Creating a background that loops endlessly and seamlessly in Flash is a skill that goes well with creating walk cycles. In this video, I will walk you through the steps of creating a looping background in Flash. Here's an example of what we will be creating. Notice how the buildings, tree, ground, and foreground elements all continuously loop. Some elements appear to be closer and others farther away. Also notice how the elements that are closer move faster, and that the buildings in the background move slower, enhancing the effect. Let's get started. Before you begin this tutorial, make sure you watch and work along with the Simple Types movie clip or graphic YouTube video tutorial. You can find a link to this video in this module in the Moodle course. It is critical that you understand the difference between movie clip and graphic symbols and how they will affect your walk cycle and looping background animations. To complete this project, you will need to have your own character walk cycle animation to work with. I will start by converting from a graphic symbol into a movie clip symbol. So I'm going to select the graphic symbol of my walk cycle animation character on the stage in scene 1. Now I'm going to go to the Properties panel, and I can see that this is currently a graphic symbol. That's how we created it during the walk cycle tutorials. I need to convert this to a movie clip symbol. So I'm going to just simply choose movie clip. Notice how the symbol changes here, and if I double click on that symbol on the stage, I can see that my symbol up here in the breadcrumb trail is also a movie clip symbol. That tells me I successfully converted it. I'm going to go back to scene 1. One other way to tell is if I scrub my timeline, I can no longer see this animation. Whereas if it were still a graphic symbol, I could see it walking here. We can also test our movie. We can go to Control, Test Movie, Test, and now we can see the animation. And that's one of the big differences between movie clip symbols and graphic symbols. Close that now. Now, because we're going to be working with movie clip symbols in this tutorial instead of graphic symbols, we no longer need these extra frames in our timeline that we created earlier. My animation, my walk cycle in this example is actually 80 frames long. So I came out to scene 1 and I had added 80 frames because I had a graphic symbol. But with the movie clip symbol, all I need is that first frame. So I'm going to select all of these extra frames, and then I'm going to right click on them, and I'm going to remove frames. So in my main timeline in scene 1, I simply have a single frame. And just to prove to you that it'll still work, I'll go out to Test Movie, and you can see that the entire animation still plays. Another key difference between graphic symbols and movie clip symbols. We only want one frame in our main timeline. We will start by drawing some background elements. Remember, our goal is to have a background that loops seamlessly. For more realism and visual interest, I will eventually draw multiple layers of background images. Some of them will be closer and others farther away. We'll start by creating a new layer out here in scene 1. And I'll name that Buildings. Now I want to start drawing my artwork on the stage. So I'm going to do it with my brush tool, and I've already set my foreground color and brush size. So I'm just going to draw a building out here. And I want to keep the style very similar to the character that I drew. And then I'm going to fill that with some color. Then I'm going to go back to my brush tool. I'm going to paint on some windows here. I'm actually going to increase my brush size a little to do this. Now this will take me a little bit of time, so I'll fast forward through some of this. You don't have to watch me do all this really slow. Now, I don't have to develop all of the background yet. I simply want to just get some artwork drawn out here. So I'm just going to draw the one building. I'm going to lock my monster layer. I'm going to select all this artwork I just drew, and I'm going to convert that into a symbol. So I'll go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. I'm going to make it a movie clip symbol, and I'm going to call this MC Buildings Background. And click on OK. Drill down into the buildings movie clip here. So I'm going to double click on it on the stage, and now I'm down inside of this MC Buildings Background movie clip symbol. You can see that up here in the breadcrumb trail. And now you can see I have an independent timeline for this movie clip symbol. Now what I want to do next is I want to zoom out just a little bit here. And I just want to draw a bunch of different buildings on here. I want to fill the stage, and I want to overlap a little to the left and overlap a little to the right. Now this is going to take me a bit of time, and I like to put each building on its own layer. So I'm going to draw another building here. Created a new layer. I'm going to draw a new building. This will take me some time, so I won't make you watch all this. I'll fast forward through it. But my goal is to fill this background up with a series of buildings. Now you can see that I've finished drawing my buildings here, and I've put them on different layers, so it's real easy to change the stacking order of them if I want to rearrange them a little. And most importantly, I've overlapped both the right side and the left side just a little. Next, we'll make a copy of this artwork. So I'm going to select all of the buildings, and I need to unlock those other layers first. Now I'll select all of the buildings. Now I'm going to hold my Alt key down if I'm on a PC, or Option if I'm on a Mac, and I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to add my Shift key once I've begun dragging. That way I don't accidentally move up or down, but I'm going to make an exact copy, and I'm going to drag these off to the right, and I want to leave a little gap between these buildings right here. And if I scroll over, you can see that I've made a copy of all of that artwork. Exact same thing. And I did not move it up or down any. Now we need to create one more piece of artwork that connects this artwork together. So I'm going to have to draw another building. I'm going to create a new layer. Make sure it's on the bottom of your stacking order here. And I'm going to draw one more building that overlaps this one and this one. And I think I'll just draw a short little building here. Just need something to connect this artwork up. I think that'll work. I'll put a little antenna up here. You've now drawn all the buildings, and you've copied them, and you've added your connector artwork here. You're ready to animate the background. Remember, to create a motion tween, you must convert the artwork into a symbol. So let's start by selecting all of our buildings here, and let's convert them to a symbol. And I'm going to call mine MC All Buildings. Make sure it's a movie clip, and click on OK. You might notice that all of your buildings have now been moved to one layer here. Let me expand this so we can see it a little better. But this top layer contains all the buildings now, and that's a movie clip symbol. I can get rid of all these extra layers. I'm going to select those and delete them. just so they're out of our way. Next, let's animate our buildings moving from left to right. I like to name my layers so that when I return to the project later, I have an easy idea of what I have to work with. So I'm going to call this buildings, and then I'm going to duplicate that layer. Right click on it, duplicate layers, and I'm going to call this one buildings guide. And I'm going to turn that into a guide layer by right clicking on its icon, tell it to be a guide. That way it won't show up in our final project. And I'm going to lock that layer, and I'm going to turn it wireframe mode on for that layer. Now I'm going to add 80 frames here to both layers. So I'm going to insert frame, not keyframe, but insert frame. And I chose 80 in this case because that was the length of my walk cycle animation, but the number of frames right now is not that critical. Now let's go to our buildings layer. Let's turn wireframe mode on it as well. And then come over here and right click and create a motion tween. Now what I want to do, I'm going to zoom in some so I can see a little better. I want to move these buildings from over here this way. And as I click and drag and move it, I'm going to hold my shift key down so I don't accidentally nudge them up or down. And I want to place them exactly, so I want to line those wireframes up. I'm going to zoom in, and I'll use my left and right arrow keys to fine tune this. And you can see that I can get those lined up perfectly there. Now what I did not do before I made that movement is I didn't move my playhead over here to frame 80. But that's okay. I can click on that keyframe one time and then click and drag it and place it out here on frame 80. Now, if I go back to fit in window, and I'm going to watch my animation. I'm going to scrub my timeline. You can see how those buildings move. I can even hide that guide layer. You can see how they move across the stage there. I'm going to do one last step here to clean up my final animation a little. I'm going to come out here to frame 80 and I'm going to click one time. And if you get too much selected, just click off to the side and click one time on that keyframe, right click it and choose remove frame. And then I'm going to come out here to the end of my motion tween and I'm going to click and drag it back to 80. And what I'm doing here is I'm removing that very last part of that animation, just one frame of it, so that frames 1 and 80 aren't exactly the same, so I don't get just a tiny bit of hesitation in my final animation. Just cleans it up a little here. But now you've animated the buildings moving from the right to the left. Now let's look at our results. So I'll go to Control, Test Movie, Test, and Watch. Now, got a couple problems. One, the buildings are on top of our character, which is not what we want. And two, those buildings appear to be moving way too fast. So let's fix that. I'm going to come back here. I'll go back to Scene 1, the top level, and I'm going to move my buildings underneath my walking character here. And now I'm going to come back into those buildings. I'm going to drill back into them. Now they're moving too fast, in my opinion, and I want them to move slower. Well, if they're only going in 80 frames, if I lengthen the amount of time for that motion tween, it should slow it down. So I'm going to hover my cursor over the end of that motion tween, and I'm going to increase the amount of time. I'm going to just double it here to begin with. Then I'll test the movie again. And as you can see, the buildings have slowed down. Now, in this example, my character is walking pretty slow. So I actually want those buildings to move slower still. And I'm just going to keep adjusting this time until I get what I want. I've played around with this a little, and I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 320 frames is probably going to be about where I want to be. Yours could be different. And there we have it. We've got my character walking across the screen, and we've got some buildings in the background that will loop endlessly here. Now occasionally with playback with a Swift file, you'll get a little bit of jumpiness to it because your computer is just having a hard time catching up to it. But you would simply continue adjusting the length of this motion tween until you get the results that you're looking for. Finally, it's up to you to add more background and environmental elements to enhance the overall look of your walk cycle animation with a looping background. Notice how I have many different levels in my example, including the sky, buildings, the ground, background trees, the character itself, and foreground trees. Be creative and add your own elements that work well with your character. In this example, all of my elements were drawn directly in Flash. If you started with a hand-drawn character that you scanned and worked in Photoshop, I suggest that you take the same approach with your looping background elements. Otherwise, the style of your graphics will not match. Experiment with many different approaches and create a variety of animated walk cycle characters to add to your own portfolio.